I'm going to call to order the Plan Commission meeting on November 19th. First up is approval of minutes. We actually have a couple to approve. Is there a motion for that?
Do you have to motion for some changes that need to be made to the October 15th one?
Oh, you have some edits that need to
Yeah.
be done?
Yeah, on 5E, you have me as both motion and second.
Yeah, that's
As much power as I would love to have, I don't think that's it. And then under 5K, you have he instead of he. So if you can make those two.
Maybe that was purposeful.
Well, that's the thing, I was kind of like, I think it was referencing me too, so I was like, is that a really he or he?
Any other edits at all? All right. Someone would like to make a motion then, we can do that.
Move approval.
I'll second.
All right, seconded by Rich. All in favor of approving minutes from October 15th and November 5th, say aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed, nay? All right. Public appearances for non-agenda items. It looks like everything I have here is for an agenda item. Agenda review, anything anyone wants to change around at all? All right, seeing none, then we can get right into it. First up is informational presentation and discussion by a number of people from the Madison School District. And so if you want to come up and it looks like you have a short presentation, you can go ahead and share with us what you are planning.
Mayor, Commissioners, pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity to come and give you some of our best thinking on a couple of referenda that the Madison Metropolitan School District is going to be putting forward in November 2020. We're getting out ahead of this. We've got a year, but we wanted to share our thoughts and see what kind of reactions you had, at least initially, to some of the things that we're thinking. So happy to introduce our small team here tonight. I'm Andrew Statz. I am an administrator working on a central office for the Madison Metropolitan School District. I will also reveal that I too am a plan commissioner, but for the city of Madison. And I have a few different departments, but enrollment and research are the most relevant for this work when it comes to things like enrollment projections and boundary management, those types of things. I'll also introduce Chad Weezy. He is our Executive Director of Buildings and Technology, along with Brendan Halverson from Chad's department. And then in the back, to make sure that we're capturing all of the ideas as part of this bigger effort to figure out where our community is Julie Halverson, taking notes as part of my team in the back. I thought it was important to bring two people with the same last name so I could keep it straight under pressure. So pretty simple, appreciate that. So the first thing I want to start off with, I suppose first thing I should start off with is how do we advance slides? Thank you. Appreciate it. So we started off with a strategic framework several years ago, and this guides some of the biggest actions of our district. This is not the same thing as a strategic plan, but it helps us make decisions and prioritize our work throughout a really open-ended period. So this is very different from a strategic plan where you have 6 years to accomplish specific things. But it's a place where we have adopted our mission statement that every school is a thriving school that prepares every student to be prepared for college, community, and career. And it is founded on these very basic values around belonging, creativity, race equity, and so on. Now, we are really a district on the move. With this kind of way of working, we've seen over the last 6 years nearly all of our elementary schools improving in literacy and math, and we've seen terrific gains for our comprehensive high schools as it relates to GPA, which is a great indicator of success, as well as the graduation rates. So what we're looking at for a potential referendum for November 2020, two things. One is an operating referendum and another capital. So it's important for me to stress that this is a potential referendum. Our board is charging us with going out, exploring alternatives, finding the reaction of the community. So we're making sure that what we're proposing reflects the values and priorities of the community. So at some point, they will receive from us a summary of all of that input. That's currently slated for January. They will likely have some follow-up questions and then make a decision about whether or not they're going to these referenda and putting them on the ballot. Sometime between, we figure, probably March and May, they would make that determination. So again, we're very early in the process, and it's information sharing both directions like tonight that make that possible. The operating referendum is the part that I'm going to start with. Do know that I just described my roles and responsibilities. I am not the CFO for the Madison Metropolitan School District, so I'm going to do my best with someone else's financial content. If you do have follow-up questions, I may have to give you the, I wonder if Chad knows the answer to that, or we'll get back to you. So bear with me. So what we have is a pattern, a 10-year history of state funding that has not satisfied the needs of K-12. And that's not just unique to Madison, but it's certainly the reason we're here tonight. So under state law, we have a limit as to the amount of money we can spend every year, unless voters say it's okay to spend more. And by that I mean local voters with a referendum offering a higher limit for our spending. And that state formula, that state law, has not been tied to anything like inflation, staff increases, salary increases, health insurance increases, those kinds of things. And the equalization aid has continued to drop off between 10 and 15% every year for Madison. And then taxpayers, local taxpayers, then have to cover the difference of that. So if you put that in perspective, 10 million to 15 million, that was about $6.5 million in reduction for us in 1 year. Pretty sizable stuff. Also, we've got vouchers and independent charters that are restricting some of our resources this year that reached just over $1 million. So this is just an illustration of what that funding history looks like. So this is a change in per pupil funding from the state. You can see pretty stable up until about 2009-10. After that, a couple of dips and a really big dip, and ever since then it's been pretty unpredictable. Now, the implication here is that we do have a serious set of fixed costs. 87% of our costs are in staffing. So there are only so many things that we can nip and tuck and trim, and eventually you're just going to be talking about something that affects students in classrooms and families. So our current state funding would look at, we're looking at about a $30 million gap over the next 3 years. So you can just, on average, figure that's about $10 million a year that we're going to be underfunded. So this is a big reason for us to go out and ask the taxpayers for additional spending authority. We typically reallocate a couple of $1 million a year, but at some point, 10 million is just something you can't protect classrooms from any longer. It would have various impacts on programs. Class sizes would get larger. High-quality teachers would be harder to recruit and retain. And then a series of equity projects that we put into place to help our students that are most in need, particularly African-American students. All of these things would have to be revisited and potentially compromised. So the next slide is just a simple illustration of what our referenda look like. So in 2016, our voters thankfully gave us authority to spend an additional $6 million a year, 6 million, 8, and then 8. Now, it's important to note that that authority does not go away. That remains in our base. But of course, because that's frozen in time, that's not keeping pace with things like inflation, utilities, benefits, those kind of expanding costs. So then the second half of this, those teal bars then, are illustrating 4 steps. So the referendum would be asking for an additional 8 million, 10, and then 10. So that would get us quite a long way to solving some of our financial difficulties, but we would still likely have to do some reallocation and cuts of about $2 million each of those years to make ends meet. So implications then on your average home. So looking at an 8 million, 8 million, 10 million, 10 million increase gets us to about $66 per year on average for $100,000 of value. And with an average home value of just under $300,000, that's about $198,000 on the average home. So that's the brief sketch of the operating referendum. I'll turn it over to Chad then to talk through the capital referendum.
Do you want to pause there for questions, or should we just keep going through and do questions all at the end? That was kind of a lot of content.
I say just keep going.
Okay, let's do it.
Questions at once.
So, yeah, I am here to discuss the kind of second half of what Andrew got kicked off here. I'm the point person when it comes to the potential of some facilities projects in Madison. If you can go to the next slide if you'd like. So I'm going to do my best to break this down into 3 buckets of work, 2 big pieces that would affect the attendance area here in Fitchburg that we'll try to spend a little bit more time on. So first, we're considering the possibility of doing major improvements and renovations and also some deferred maintenance work at our existing high schools. And that's kind of the final bullet there. And that's a $280 million potential ask. And once again, these are just, at this point, big ideas and schematic drawings we'll go through here in a second. And that would mean a $70 million investment at each of our 4 comprehensive high schools. And that's Lafalot, East, Memorial, and West. And we'll get to those projects here shortly. The second piece, working backwards there, is the possibility of a new elementary school. I'll spend a little bit more time there. That could certainly have an impact on folks in this attendance area. So currently, if you can kind of picture the area, Rimrock Road area south of the Beltline, kind of where Badger Rock Middle School is, the little cluster of car dealerships. We currently have 450 K through 5, kindergarten through 5th grade students that live in that attendance area that currently get on a bus every morning to go to an elementary school. They primarily go to one of 2 places. They primarily go to either Frank Alice Elementary School or Nuestra Mundo Elementary School. Frank Alice is a school we own, and currently 260 students from that attendance area hop on a bus and go to that school every day. Lots of times that bus ride is over 40 minutes long, assuming traffic and weather are all in good shape. And then the other group of students, 150, go to Nuestra Mundo, and that's actually at a site that we lease from the Monona School District. And that's been kind of a stopgap solution to a charter school that got off the ground here a little less than 10 years ago. And we've known all along we wanted to get out of a leasing arrangement from Monona. Most school districts of our size do not lease schools from other smaller school districts. So we believe there's the potential of a win-win scenario somewhere with a new elementary school down in that Rimrock Road area. We're exploring the possibility of either doing a new Nuestra Mundo, getting out of the lease and building a new school down in that area, or the other option would be to take those 260 students and build them a neighborhood school that would be a walking school down in that area and move Nuestra Mundo into Frank Alice. But either way, we'd be getting out of the leasing arrangement with Nuestra Mundo. The last piece that was the top bullet there, we're considering also a scenario where we have 2 small off-campus high school alternatives that are called Capital East and Capital West High School. Those 2 sites, we've got Capital East High School that currently is on the 3rd floor of Lapham Elementary. Lapham is an elementary school on East Washington Avenue. Got about 100 high school students that attend school every day with elementary school age students, and they just share the same space. But those students don't have access to a cafeteria. They don't have access to a gymnasium. They don't have access to green space. They essentially get to use the 3rd floor of Lapham. And then Capital West High School, another smaller off-campus alternative. We are currently leasing what's essentially a retrofit storefront across the street from Memorial High School. So in both of those scenarios, those are both temporary in our mind. So we're exploring the possibility of taking the Hoyt Elementary School, where we currently have MSCR adults primarily, it's an old elementary school, and investing $6 million into that site and consolidating Capital High East and Capital High West into one site. Also getting out of a $100,000 plus year lease with that storefront we're renovating. So did my best to kind of scream through what turns out to be about $315 million in capital work. So I did want to go through the next slides here and kind of take us through rather quickly, and then certainly here to answer any follow-up questions you might have as far as any of these projects go. So I did want to spend a little bit more time on West High School. West, as many of you may know, is at capacity, has been over 100% capacity for quite some time. It's our biggest high school right now, and any given day, on a 7-period day at West, you will not find an empty instructional space. West is as full as West can get. It's over 100% capacity. So embedded in the projects at West, and all of these projects have very detailed, plan sets and ideas online. Certainly, if you're interested in follow-up or more detailed information. At West, we're considering adding 12 additional instructional spaces. Part of that would happen kind of in that red box in the middle of that diagram. I know it's kind of tough to see, where we're considering a 2-story addition that would add 8 classrooms to the middle of the building. Down in the lower right-hand corner there, we're exploring what could be an addition on the Ash Street side that would allow us some accessibility to areas of the building that currently are not accessible for students that have any wheelchair needs whatsoever. We have a makeshift ramp to one floor, and then there's areas of the building there that are not accessible at all for students. And then we're also exploring the possibility of a new swimming pool at West High School. We take the existing small, undersized, very old swimming pool and turn that into instructional space as well. So in a nutshell on that project, we are looking at adding up to 12 additional classroom spaces, and also then, along with that $70 million spend, just a complete redo of all the instructional spaces, including labs at West. So kind of a complete do-over at West High School. West is over 100 years old and hasn't had a major capital reinvestment in 40 or 50 years. So we believe it's time. You can go to the next slide if you want. So there's you can flip back to that one. So that's just a quick elevation of what potentially West High School could look like from the Ash Street side. I don't know how familiar you are with that, but the new addition would be that bump out to the left that we're doing our best to mirror the historic architecture of that Ash Street side. Next, and I'll go through these a little bit more quickly. Memorial High School, also a school that is nearing capacity that we're looking to add some instructional space to. Some highlights in that project. We're considering a new theater, a new fine arts center over there on the far left on the first floor. And then we reutilize some of the space that we would free up with the existing theater that's outdated and really not serving the needs of students and staff at Memorial for some new instructional spaces. All the light blue on all these projects are areas that we are considering kind of moderate to heavy renovation, that we wouldn't necessarily be knocking down walls, but would be redoing all the instructional spaces from floor to ceiling. Next. There's just a couple of visuals. So one's an elevation of what the Memorial Fine Arts Center might look like. That would be a bump out that would be between Memorial and Jefferson Middle School. And we're considering enclosing a courtyard. That's what that art there on the right is. Next. Quick run around Lafalot High School. So Lafalot, there is a decent amount of new construction we're considering. Some highlights in that project. The possibility of taking their current spectator gym, where we currently don't even have the capacity to get the entire student body into that space, and taking their current field house and changing that into a spectator gym, and then adding 2 new gyms because we're considering taking their current spectator gym and changing that into a science, tech, engineering, and math center. Also considering doubling the size of their main corridor, which right now is incredibly cramped, adding a couple of new additions for practice space for music, and a new kind of main entrance from Flom Road. Next one. A couple more pieces of art there. What could be possible with that main entrance on the left and what could be possible with the common space on the right. Next, we've got East. So East, not a ton of new construction. East is a little bit landlocked, similar to West. And there's a couple of floor plans in the next drawings that we don't have to spend a ton of time on, but same story there. Once again, getting into all of our classrooms for a complete reboot and reimagining of those instructional spaces. The possibility of a new main entrance off of 4th Street. That right there is art on what could be possible off an athletics addition on the north side of the building. And we don't have to spend a ton of time on small drawings that don't mean a ton to you, but big idea there is East is also over 100 years old and really hasn't been touched in quite some time. All the spaces essentially look like they're in a time capsule, and we think they're ready for a pretty major reinvestment. So similar to what Andrew did, a quick rundown on the financial side. Those 4 high school projects at $70 million apiece would have a $61 a year impact on $100,000 of home value. Different from what Andrew mentioned in terms of the operating side, this would be a capital referendum with a bond issued that would be paid off over 20 years. Our CFO would have the ability to pay off more or less of that any given year to kind of balance the tax load. The capital high scenario I walked through with you, that $6 million investment would be $1 on a $100,000 home value. The Rimrock Road new elementary school, $25 to $30 million we're estimating there, would be a total of $7 for a grand total of $69 on $100,000 whole value on the capital side. Quick timeline, as Andrew mentioned, we're about halfway through a roadshow, and I'm glad you guys, thank you guys for having us here tonight, where we're taking as much community feedback, and we're certainly answering as many questions as possible. And we've got a pretty major report due to our school board in January to kind of get back on a summary of all the findings and big ideas we heard through all of these input sessions. At that point, we imagine our board will send us back to revise maybe some of these plans, maybe go back to the public for some more feedback, some more information gathering. And we believe the school board will be positioned to have a vote on this referendum sometime in the spring, March or April. At that point, once the board's made the vote, it's headed to the ballot, November of 2020. We'd essentially have 5, 6, 7 months to just make sure that the public's as informed as possible around what could end up on the ballot.
I know one question I had for these guys with that Rimrock Road Elementary School is, are they looking in areas that are going to go to Fitchburg? And it sounds like at this point, no. They've looked at some spots, but unlikely, which was unfortunate. It'd be nice to have a Madison Elementary School in Fitchburg. But at this point anyway, you never know. Maybe something else will come up. Other questions, comments people have? Rich?
What happened in 2010 and 11, or 11 and 12?
Those were policy changes from Governor Walker.
Thank you for presenting this, appreciate it.
Yep, thanks
Is
for having
any
us.
of this going to take on a growth, like student body growth? Or it sounded like the presentation was just a lot of fit and finish, if you will, polishing up the...
Yeah, there certainly is a need for that. Our buildings have been long ignored. We're projected to grow about 1,700 students over the next 20 years. Memorial and Lafalot in particular are areas that we will have increased enrollment coming down, and we're planning accordingly with some of the additions we're doing there.
Okay.
And West has long been over capacity, and it's been a long time coming to add instructional spaces at West.
So those at West, specifically those 8 or 12, you said?
Yeah, it's going to be 11 or 12 new classroom spaces.
So will that ease the need then? Like,
It's going to allow, I think, the building to breathe a little bit. Right now, there isn't a time, if you're a science teacher, there isn't a time that you're not waiting at the door. If you teach chemistry, for the chemistry class to leave, the chemistry teacher to exit, and you attempt to set your classroom up. There isn't a time or a space that if you need to have a staff meeting with your English department, 7th period, they have a hard time finding a place to even sit down with 15 adults, let alone bring 2 or 3 classrooms together to do any collaborative work. So at West is, Andrew can tell you, I think we have them pretty much permanently at 101, 102, 103% capacity. So there's more students there than should be there per the space they have.
Yeah, we're alarmed anytime we're over 90%. Ideally, over 80 gets your attention.
Right.
And it does have some implications for students and the services they receive, the academic outcomes. You can imagine how hard it is to collaborate with other teachers, which really is a powerful experience to improve student outcomes when you have no space to meet or classrooms that are available. So that kind of a packed schedule needs some breathing room. for some of that collaboration. It's a little less apparent to most people, but is a pretty important factor in the school day.
Definitely. Thanks.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments at all? Tom?
I guess I can't help but to think that Fitchburg sits in an area that would be beneficial to the city. Listening to your presentation, the only other community around here may be Monona. But maybe Middleton too, I guess. But when you look at Fitchburg, you got Oregon with 2 schools they're about to put out here. Verona is already here. Epic sits in our backyard. MATC sits on the south end. I think you better relook at Fitchburg.
Yeah, Fitchburg has been an area of interest for us since I got here. Land availability is the challenge, and I want to point out that the referendum we have in front of us, consider it one of a series. So, similar to other school districts, we've been hesitant to put referenda forward, but we have realized that we need to have a steady diet of facility improvements and expansions, and that's exactly the kind of thing that you're talking about. We have a draft plan that was reviewed by our board, and they would like some more time before they call it final, but it's a really great repository for all of the areas that we are looking at and consider to be priorities. The Fitchburg area is one of our priorities. The Allied area is another priority. The North Side and those 4 small schools are another area of priority. This referendum represents the things that we believe are the most pressing, but also the most possible, which is another way of saying we feel that we have a better line on land availability to build a school in the Rimrock area than we do in the Allied or in the Fitchburg areas. But they are definitely our priorities, and what we're trying to do is establish a regular kind of a diet of referenda that allow us to do that kind of acquisition and development. Absolutely.
Well, I think, too, keep in mind when these subdivisions are placed out in Fitchburg, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of the subdivisions, a lot of those schools, a lot of the areas maybe where we put the schools, not all of them, but if I'm not mistaken, wouldn't that be west, off the top of my head?
Yeah, I think much of this
Be
area
the
is
west area?
west attendance area.
Be west?
Yep.
Because I don't think our kids go to Lafalot or east.
Nope.
So, food for thought.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? All right. Seeing nothing. Thank you both for coming and sharing with us what you're working on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
stay tuned. And if you guys have anything else or need any additional information, Google MMSD Future Ready. There's a survey there and a ton of information, and also a spot you can send us more feedback or ask questions if you have any.
Yep, hit us directly too. You know,
Yep,
you know who
absolutely.
we are.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thanks for
the
having
time.
us.
All right, yeah, thank you. All right. Moving along to 5B, it's a survey map. It's a request to change a lot line by Dale Benjamin. I don't see Dale. Do you want to, Sonia? I do have Tim Held, who just is registering in support of the above matter. But other than that, I don't have anything else.
I can give an overview, and then Tim, if you have any additional information, you could chime in. This is just a really simple certified survey map. It's a lot line adjustment between 2 parcels over on King James Way, adjacent to Verona Road. What it does is it moves the existing property line here just slightly to the north to accommodate an existing parking lot. And that's the only change associated with the CSM. Staff recommendation is for approval as listed in the staff report.
All right, and like I said, Tim Held, registered in support of the above matter. Other questions, comments at all on this?
I move to approve CS 2321-19 with the 2 conditions noted by staff.
Second.
All right, second by Lane. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay. All right, and that one passes. On to C.
Thank you.
And thank you. And C and D are more or less the same project. We have to do a couple things. Do you probably have, I'm not sure which one of these people is the applicant, but Jason, if you want to come up and kind of let people know what's going on, then we'll do the public hearing. There's a number of people that want to speak on this.
Hello, Jason Geiger, on behalf of Paul Maxwell, the Purcell property. So I was here last month and proposed a lot split. And the original proposal was a 2-acre lot in the northwest corner of that parcel. That got moved because it wasn't within the 300 feet criteria. So we moved that to the west of the farmhouse and buildings. And that just seemed to be the best fit for that, for a building site there. So.
All right. I will open the public hearing first. I have some people who would put D as the agenda item, but I believe that now is really probably the right time to read these. I have Martin Widmer from Fitchburg registering in opposition of the above matter. I have Aaron Widmer registering opposition of the above matter with the comment, my main concern is that Mr. Maxwell has no connection with the community or the land and therefore no commitment to care for the land or neighborhood. If he would like to move into the neighborhood, there's a very nice home already there. I'm afraid this is for a profit-only venture. And then I also have James Gameter from Fitchburg registering in opposition of the above matter. And those are all of the slips I have that want to comment or speak on this, unless I missed something. All right, seeing nothing else, I will close the public hearing. And do you want to give a staff report?
So this is the same application that we saw last month that was tabled by Plan Commission and Ag and Rural Affairs. And as the applicant noted, it's been revised. So this is reviewed in accordance with our RDC, Rural Residential Development Criteria, that are found in the comprehensive plan. And it does allow some new limited rural residential development and new lot splits based on the base farm acreage. So what it did is it moves Lot 2 over here to Adams Road. The applicant meets all of the required criteria of the RRDC, but he's still requesting waivers for 2 criteria. One is the history of tillage, and we documented last month that the entire parcel does have history of tillage. So if that's the case, they can still request the waiver, but then it should be located in a way that provides minimal disruption to farming practices. So they try to encourage that the new lot would be located at the edge of the farm field. In the staff memo, I did note that this sort of leaves this configuration of a finger sort of remnant agricultural land on the edge, and whether or not that would be a disruption to farming practices. So I at least raised that question in the staff memo, and then deferred to the expertise at Ag and Rural Affairs. So our representative could probably give us an update on what happened there earlier tonight at the Ag and Rural Affairs Committee meeting. And they are also requesting the lot size waiver to exceed 1.5 acres to go up to 2 acres. And the reasoning provided by the applicant is that the crest of the hill is further north or on the back end of the property, and therefore it needs to be that depth in order to provide that site for building the home.
Ed, would you like to share what Ag and Rural Affairs talked about and did tonight?
Sure. We did vote in favor of this. There were concerns that we share with staff with regard to the ability to farm the remaining portion to the west. But if you look at the history of tillage on this farm, it has been farmed from north to south. So it is still reasonably possible to farm that. This isn't an ideal configuration, but on the other hand, there really wasn't any other place that they could put it. I mean, theoretically, I think it could have gone on the other side of the existing farmhouse, but there were slope issues there, and it gets a little wet as you go toward the road. So this was the most likely spot. I understand the reason for going to 2 acres rather than 1.5 was to get a portion of the top of that hill, so you don't have to build into a slope, which does make some sense. And that area where they would be building the house itself is fairly gravelly anyhow. It's not great farmland. So the configuration is odd. It's not great, but we didn't really see another viable solution, and we don't think it's going to be impossible or even necessarily difficult to farm the part to the west.
Other thoughts, comments, or maybe you want to provide more of your own versus a report on Ag and Rural Affairs, but other comments by anyone at all?
No, my only question was about whether or not that little strip left could be farmed, and the 2 acres doesn't bother me, as staff mentioned, what you mentioned with the slope of the hill there. So in here it was pretty ambiguous whether or not that could be farmed. So are we saying that with some confidence that, yes, that is possible there?
We thought so, yes.
Okay.
Any other comments at all?
The only other concern that was raised is Ag and Rural wanted to add an additional condition that both of these home sites would have to sign off on the right to farm statement. Normally, that would only be required for the new home site, but in this case, there is a possibility that there will be active dairy directly across the street from this. We don't know whether that's going to happen, but we know it's a possibility, and we want to make sure that any potential homeowners for either of those homes is on notice that that's the case. So we wanted to add that as a condition, that they both sign that.
Did you add that in agri?
We did.
Okay.
We did. We added an 11th condition to the CSM, yeah.
Other comments at all?
Question on that, you just said you added 11th, but there's already 12 in the CSM? Did you have a different list, or
Oh, maybe we did.
did you have 13?
We added one to whatever there is.
There's 12 in.
Looks like there's,
Must have added a 13th.
If you did, that's fine. I just want to make sure that you weren't working from, and we've got 2 extra ones that we should rectify with egg.
It's number 5, though.
18.
Look at number 5.
Yeah, we had 10 conditions.
Oh,
Yeah, so there's 2 more added. Number 5 is the
Yep, I
right.
did add those two standard 11 and 12 after Ag and Rural Affairs, but they're just standard conditions regarding utility easements.
Oh, got it.
Yep.
Okay.
and then, 5 should really be, what you're saying is instead of just applicant, but both properties should have that.
Yeah, you could incorporate that into 5. I guess we had it as a separate item, but that wouldn't be necessary as long, yeah.
is that something someone wants to, you can add that, I guess, as a part of an approval, so we'll have to make a
We have to
motion.
take them separately, don't we?
You have to, first do the,
I move to approve RZ 2317-19 with the 4 conditions noted by staff.
Second.
all right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And so that is C, the rezone request. And so then going to D, it's really kind of the same thing. I'm guessing that there's nothing else you want to add, Jason?
No.
All right. Any other further comments at all? Otherwise, someone can make a motion on D as well.
I make a motion to approve CS 2318-19 with 12 conditions as stated by staff.
And are you changing number 5 to include both properties?
Oh, and changing number 5 to include both properties.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ed. Any further discussion? All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? All right, thank you. Thanks, Jason. All right, moving on to E, public hearing and consideration of telecommunications facilities permit request. I don't know if, Richard, you want to kind of speak to what this is first before we get to any comments at all?
Thank you. Richard Rogers, representing United States Cellular Operating Company. There has been a lack of good coverage in this particular area where we're attempting to locate. With the advent of texting and sending documents, photographs, et cetera, the original network is capable of handling telephony, but with the advent of all the, like I mentioned, the text, documents, et cetera, we have a capacity issue, and a lot of services are not getting through. So this kind of fills the gap, as shown in our propagation maps, what coverage it would provide versus the coverage that we don't have now.
All right. First, I will open the public hearing. I did get one email from Andrew Bowman, president of Bowman Farms, and I'm sorry for late notice. However, I plan to attend the Planning Commission meeting this evening to register against the proposed U.S. Cellular Tower. I reviewed the submittal and feel this monstrosity of a tower that would be in position along future proposed environmental area on property of ours could forever, or many years, be not only an eyesore, but cause harm to wildlife and the natural environment. There are other areas within the city this could be better placed, but not where it is proposed. Sincerely, Andy Bowman. And I don't have any other registrations on this piece. So seeing nothing else, I will close the public hearing component of this. And do you want to give staff report?
So on the agenda, items E, F, and G are all related. In order to get approval of this project, the applicant needs approval of a telecom facilities permit. So that's the first item. Also a conditional use permit under the RR zoning district that this property has as its zoning designation. And then the third thing is architectural design reviews for the actual site and structural development of the tower. So this is a proposed 126-foot tall monopole new telecom tower located just south of Nobel Drive on the east side of Fish Hatchery Road. It's located behind an existing residential building and has a gravel drive going back to the gravel pad where the 125-foot tower would sit, along with its associated equipment, and then it's surrounded by a chain link fence. The ordinance does require that the applicant first pursue co-location or putting the new antenna and equipment on existing towers or existing tall buildings. And if they can show that that's not feasible in order to get the coverage that's needed, then they may request a waiver from the Plan Commission to build a new tower. So that's what they're doing here. There was backup information supported included in the packet, and the applicant can describe that in more detail if there are questions regarding coverage for US Cellular. And then also the tower is required to provide for co-location of 4 carriers on this new tower. So it just encourages co-location of other carriers on this tower if we are going to allow a new one. So the staff recommendation for all 3 items is approval. Under the conditional use permit and architectural design review, the conditions are very standard. And then under the telecom facilities permit, there are 10 recommended conditions of approval, and a lot of those are taken just directly from Chapter 64, which regulates these types of permits.
All right. Any questions, comments? Yeah, Ed.
I have a couple of questions for Mr. Rogers. Are you anticipating that there will be likely co-location from other carriers on this tower?
Yes, we anticipate there will be, for the simple reason that 5G is in the process of being rolled out by major carriers at this time. And this will be, along with the standard operating equipment, it will be a 5G tower. So we have a master lease agreement with Sprint. All the wireless major carriers have a master lease agreement. We can go on their tower, they can go on ours. And as I explained in my narrative, that our first, whenever people are looking for location, you always look at co-location first because it's about 1/3 of the cost of building a new site. So I'm sure Verizon, Sprint, AT&T, somebody will be along shortly.
That kind of leads into my next question. With the 5G technology coming, doesn't that theoretically reduce the need for capacity? Is this really more a capacity issue or a
This is a capacity, 5G is just going to increase capacities. It's a faster mode of operandi, and more people will probably be using it than are using it now. For instance, a lot of commercial use will be used with 5G.
So would you anticipate that the other existing towers are going to need to be upgraded then?
Most of them are in the process, if not now, but very shortly being upgraded, yes.
Okay, thanks.
It's a matter of swapping out antennas and adding RRUs, radios.
Okay, so the towers are not the issue, it's really just the antenna.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions at all or comments?
Yeah, I got a
Rich?
quick one,
Yeah.
Mr. Rogers.
Sorry.
Is there going to be emergency generators on site for power?
We went, most of the carriers are going now from where we used to have buildings with our equipment and generators in. It's just a cabinet type of equipment with a 48-hour backup battery pack. And US Cellular has located portable generators that can reach just about anywhere in the state within 8 to 10 hours, if required. Or if necessary, I should say.
Yeah. hopefully we never need
Let's
a
hope
24 or
not.
48-hour battery.
I don't think we'll get a hurricane here, but you never know about a tornado.
So that footprint at the bottom of this tower is pretty small then? Right?
Pardon?
So the footprint over here,
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
the footprint of this tower at the bottom is smaller than normal then?
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah, Zach?
Where else did you look then? I'm sorry, I couldn't find anything on the other research on co-location.
Yes, we scrubbed the area pretty heavily. And this seemed to be because it's quite a ways off Fish Hatchery Road. It's up in that property was used previously as a, what do you call it? It's war games with pellet balls. I can't-
Paintball? Paintball?
Paintball, yeah, it was kind of a paintball course. And there's a bunch of trees around it, some scrub trees that the landowner's going to take down anyway, so we're pretty well hidden back there.
Tom, you had a comment?
I do see where this is located off of Fish Hatchery Road to the east. I don't have the expertise, but my question is, across the street, there's a water tower. There's a water tower. I know for a fact. Did you ever look at that water tower? And because of the where this is located, has this been run through the neighbors? Have the neighbors seen this?
I think
The
neighbors were
neighborhood's seen
noticed
this?
because of the public hearing. But Mr. Strassman talked to his immediate neighbors, and they didn't have an issue with it. To answer your question about the water tower, carriers are no longer going in water towers because of the great expense. It costs us between $70,000 and $120,000 every time we have to move antennas up there for painting, excuse me, or repainting. And so we just don't locate on water towers anymore.
Anything else? All right, if someone wants to make a motion for the telecommunications permit, that'd be great.
I'll move approval of TFP 2320-19 with, how many, are there 6 conditions?
10,
Oh, 10 conditions is noted by staff.
Is there a second?
second.
Seconded by Lane. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, then moving to 5F, we also have to have a public hearing for this. So I can open that, and, you know, we heard from Andy Bowman earlier, same comments really on this as well, that he thinks it's a little bit of monstrosity and not really the best spot for it. I don't have anything else from the community, so I will close that public hearing. Anything else you want to add, Sonia? All right. Any further questions at all, comments on the conditional use permit?
Move approval of CU 2322-19 with the standard condition.
Second.
All right, seconded by Zach. We'll go right to vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? All right, and that passes. And then we have the ADR. And so is there any questions, comments on the architectural design review at all? Anything further? All right.
I'll move approval of ADR with a standard condition.
Second.
I'm sorry, there's 2 conditions. Second with regard to the driveway length.
All right. Then all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, and that passes as well. And so we can move along to H. And let me get that spot. So H is ADR for 1913 South Fish Hatchery Road. If Bob, or I'm not sure who is going to present at all, all right, that'd be great. Excellent. Why don't you tell us what you're doing and what you're working on?
I'll just give you a brief history, and then Bob can probably address most of your questions. But I own the farm to the south of this piece of property, and had been kind of eyeballing that barn for quite a while, and when it came up for sale, I nabbed it because it's a gorgeous old barn. And then I kind of panicked and thought, what am I going to do with this gorgeous old barn? So the idea has been percolating for a while, and I came up with this idea. It is a working farm. I want it to be a working farm. My background is in horticulture, and I'm interested in permaculture. So I got this idea of turning it into a permaculture-based farm, looking at the wetlands and conservation as well, and there's a woods and an old oak savanna remnant there, and creating a place that was available to the public to come on a reservation-only kind of limited basis, so they could also experience the joys of what a farm is all about. So that's it in a nutshell. And that's what the barn needed renovating, it needed saving, so I'm working on that, and then hope to have this public interaction aspect to it.
Could you further describe what types of activities would go on inside the barn?
Anything related to agriculture. The idea initially is not to do our own programming. We'll just provide a site where school kids, beekeepers is my favorite example, anybody interested in any kind of silvopasture, conservation, you know, you have groups, you come out, you have a place where you can have a meeting about it, have a demonstration, and then go out on the land and look at it in action. So just anything agriculture related.
Do you want to speak at all to what you're doing? Or what?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
For Mary Ann, if I might. Can you kind of tell us, as you did at Ag and Rural, a little bit about the different crops that you're looking at here, so we can kind of understand what permaculture
Okay, so
is?
permaculture is perennial crops as opposed to a more traditional corn and soybean annual rotation of crops. So these are crops that you don't have to plant every single year. Right now we have hops started. Hay is another crop that will be in production that we've started there. Additionally, we have some berries, a long-term timber project, so like walnuts, just a few acres of walnut trees for timber, cider apples, woody ornamentals, things like red twig dogwoods, yellow twig dogwoods, pussy willows that we can harvest and sell to the florist industry. So that type of crop.
Thanks.
My name is Bob Borrell, and I'm an architect working with Mary Ann. And so I'll address the design issues here. So we have two existing silos and a barn. The south silo will be stabilized and remain. And future use is not defined at this point. The west silo, so the front of the barn faces Fish Hatchery Road. The west silo will be stabilized, it will be insulated, a slab will be poured, and it will become a functional mechanical room for a fire sprinkler system and water tanks to serve the new facility. The existing barn is 34 by 96 feet. That's a little over 3,200 gross square feet. And it's in pretty decent shape. The foundation's in good shape, but the floor has got to go. There's a high water table on the site, so we are raising the floor elevation by 1.5 foot, and then gaining a little more additional headroom on that first floor by jacking the barn up. So the first floor, if we go to the floor plans, the first floor existing barn is going to have some structural remediation. It doesn't meet real current codes for structure, So new columns, beams, structural reinforcement for the shell, which is all happening internally. The exterior is going to be clad with insulation system known as SIPs, or structural insulated panels. The advantage of those is they go on the exterior and preserve all the original woodwork on the interior, so the framing system will be exposed to view. Mary Ann feels it's really important to maintain the barn look when you go inside. So they'll be on the outside, and then they'll be clad with the new stone veneer at the base of the building, and metal siding and metal roofing. So we're just maintaining the existing architecture of what's there. There originally were two cupolas on the top, both in pretty bad shape. They're going to be rebuilt and will actually become functional air exhaust vents for the HVAC system in the building. So the existing barn, the first floor, is going to have a new egress stair for the second floor, a library, study, resource center, and then access to a patio to the west and a demonstration garden of herbs and perennials. The north end is going to have the lobby, reception, a gathering, and flex space. So the idea is to really keep this building flexible so it can adapt and accommodate different gatherings and functions. Then the space in between, it will be a farm office, the bathrooms and mechanical room. And the second floor is going to be one large open gathering, meeting, flex room, and some new bathrooms. So then we're doing an east addition to really make this building function. We need fire stairs and we need an elevator. So we're going to build a new elevator on the east side and an egress stair, and it'll have the new front entry will be on the east side facing Fish Hatchery Road. The west addition will have, and that's 1,222 square feet. We'll have a demonstration kitchen, and then the kitchen support area, storage, dishwash, that type of thing. A snack bar and a dining kind of flex lounge area with a fireplace. There will also be some small mechanical, electrical, dumbwaiter, janitor, closet, surface entry on that addition. And then that also will have access to the west patio garden, demonstration garden. So the original building is that iconic Wisconsin gambrel barn roof, and that's timeless. So our intent is to preserve it for the next 100 years. It's an agricultural operation, and the building will continue to reflect that. We're going to be cladding the exterior in a vertical metal panel to really mimic the original. The colors, we have some samples in front of me here. The red color that we happen to find is spot on. You can put it up against the existing red and you can't even notice a difference. The roof will be the galvalume metal, which is again the traditional Wisconsin metal barn roof. And there's going to be some natural stone for the base, which will be a Wisconsin quarried limestone in that warm honey-colored limestone with a flush mortar to mimic an original old barn. And the front entry is going to have an exposed timber truss canopy. The interiors are just going to be an honest expression of the materials with wood, steel, concrete, cable, exposed conduit, and ductwork. The intent is not to try to create something more than what it really is. They're simple materials, and the building needs to be flexible to adapt to a variety of functions. The design has been approved by the Wisconsin Department of Safety and Buildings under the Commercial Building Code. The completed structure will incorporate current state-of-the-art building technology. It will be fully accessible to ADA standards and will incorporate safety features, including a complete fire sprinkler system. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them. Thank you.
All right, I don't have anything from the public, so if you have any comments or questions or anything like that, let me know. You can ask those, Stephen.
Did this go to Ag and Rural Affairs?
It did. We looked at it this afternoon. Ag and Rural enthusiastically recommended approval of this. This is a great project and a great representation of what agriculture can be in Fitchburg going forward. We think it's a really great overall project, not just the barn preservation, but what Mary Ann is doing with the land, the different crops, and possibly sheep, I think you said also,
Yes, and chickens.
and chickens.
Marion, how'd you get on this idea? Like, I know you
I
said-
don't know. It just came into my head. I mean, I like permaculture. I'm in favor of organic agriculture. It's hard to do, but that's my goal. I work towards that, minimizing our inputs and getting everything naturally. It's just always been a passion of mine, and I don't know how I got on this.
I like it.
Thank you.
Apple orchards, the whole nine. I was wondering, I drove by there and I was wondering what was going on.
Other comments at all?
I'll move to approve the ADR for 1913 South Fitchburg Road with the 9 conditions noted by staff.
I have these agreements to the stormwater management agreement, and that, does somebody want those now?
Staff level.
Okay.
I do have a
I'll second.
Yep.
Oh, okay, before we vote,
Yeah, so we supposed to have staff report, right?
Yeah, I just also wanted to point out the proposed driveway is coming off of Adams Road. So this is over 3,000-foot-long driveway. And according to the property file, this had been discussed some years ago. And there's an issue with this South Fish Hatchery Road being controlled by Dane County Highway, and allowing access off of that portion of the site would require some substantial site upgrades for turning lanes. So the applicants then moved the driveway to Adams Road. So that does comply with our standards for long rural driveways. So that's a 20-foot wide paved driveway with gravel shoulders and base course. And then it also provides turnarounds for fire safety along the way, and provides the stormwater and required erosion control permits. And then I did also just want to note for the record, as Ed said, this is consistent with our exclusive ag zoning, so this doesn't require any sort of zoning approval or conditional use permit, as long as the uses that are proposed stay consistent with ag-related uses. And then the staff recommendation is for approval, and it includes those 9 conditions. I just wanted to add a clarification to condition number 7 regarding that access off of Fish Hatchery Road. So the applicants are proposing that it will remain and would be used for farm equipment access only, as it currently is. And then they would also put a gate with a lock that would be accessible for safety personnel to get in through that access. So we are still just confirming with Dane County that allowing that access to remain is acceptable with the gated access. So I would recommend adding a clarification there, that retaining that access upon the determination of the Public Works Director after consultation with Dane County Highway would be allowable.
All right, thank you. Any other comments at all? Tom?
The, coming off Adams Road, I'm sure staff looked at it, it was okay. I mean, Fish Hatchery Road is right there, not too far away, but I guess you have the clearance. Is your thought that the clearance is okay there with the driveway versus where Fish Hatchery Road is? As far as people coming out, you know,
Right,
there's not
so-
a lot of clearance there between, I'm okay with the driveway if staff was. I'm okay with it.
Yep,
going
we
in.
support the proposed Adams Road main access, and then gating Fish Hatchery access for personnel, fire safety personnel only, and farm equipment.
And then it's minor, but put signage on Adams Road that driveway's there. That's a long driveway. And I'm just talking about highway can do, never mind, highway can do that. We can check with them. We can check with them.
Any last questions or comments at all? All right, since we have a motion and a second, then we can go ahead and vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, great. Looking forward to seeing more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up is a pre-app PPD for the Jew site. Michael and team, if you guys want to come up and kind of share with us what you're working on.
Thanks, Aaron. My name is Michael Thorson. I'm from Adventure Capital, along with my co-founder back here, Ned Hoyt. I grew up in Wisconsin, and I would like to say we are both proud residents of Fitchburg, so it's exciting to kind of bring this project closer to home. A little bit on Adventure before I turn it over to Joe. We have been working with Sonia and Lisa and Mike and Pat, who seem to have disappeared now, for 5 or 6 months now, bringing this to fruition. So it's kind of exciting now. We're going to get started here through the formal process. So Adventure has been developing multifamily here in the Madison area and, oddly enough, Australian residential lot subdivisions for over 10 years. This is going to be our 5th multifamily project in the Madison area. It'll be the 2nd that we've been the lead developer on. We have a top-notch team, development partners here. We've got JLA and Associates, McGrath Property Group, Vierbricker and Associates, and Krupp General Contractors, all of whom I'm pretty sure you're familiar with projects that they've done previously in the Fitchburg area. Some of you had the opportunity to tour our most recent project. It was called Garver Point. It is out by the Garver Feed Mill redevelopment. We are looking to do something very similar. We're excited to kind of bring what we did there. It is opened on July 1st. It was 100% occupied now after 3.5 months. So that was a very successful project. We don't like to reinvent the wheel. We see what works, we tinker with it, and we bring it to new areas. We think this is very much consistent with the direction that the future comprehensive plan is going with the redevelopment of the Fitch-Hatchery Road corridor in conjunction with the road construction itself, increasing the density and desirability of living and working in that area going forward. So with that, just a brief summary about us. I would turn it over here to Joe to give you a brief project overview and open it up for questions. Thanks.
Great. Thanks. Joe Lee with JLA Architects. Sonia, I don't know if you can go to the site plan or the master plan. I'll give a brief overview of our proposal here and open it up for questions. This is at I guess it would be the southeast corner of Traceway and Fish-Hatchery Road. So this project will be done in conjunction with the extension of Traceway to the east. That's what you're seeing there on the north side of our property there. This is a mixed-use multifamily building, so it will contain 160 units. Multifamily units, as well as about 10,000 square feet of commercial and retail. The site, it's kind of a challenging site, as many of you probably know. The grade drops off from the corner of Traceway and Fish Hatch as you go south down Fish Hatchery, about 13 feet or so. So there's some challenges there, and then it falls off as you go west-east as well. So the proposed building is a 4 to 5 story, and why I say that, it really depends on, as we work the grading of the building, the grade falls off, so on the eastern side of that building, there'll be a little more exposure. So it could be technically classified as a 5-story when all said and done, but it will be 5 levels, whether it's a 4-story or a 5-story technically. That'll be determined as we progress the design. But the concept is that to have commercial retail uses along Fish Hatchery was a goal, and a goal that the city wanted us to explore as well. But as you may know, the grade dropping off 13 feet along Fish Hatchery presents some challenges for that. So what this concept is we're bookending the south and north ends of the building with roughly 5,000 square feet of retail each. And then in the center, we have our parking in our multi-family development or units. To make the commercial retail viable, there needs to be some semblance of visibility and visibility to the parking as well. So on the north side, we have a small convenient parking area that could be used for the whole facility, but mainly for the retail or commercial. And then on the south side, we have the same. On that lowest level, you can see we have a U-shaped or a C-shaped, depending on how you look at it, building with a interior courtyard. And if many of you have toured the Garver Point project that we did with Mike and his team, it's very similar. That will be a green roof over the parking that will be used, available to use by the residents. So that'll be a mixture of hardscape and landscape and common amenities. It's yet to be designed. Yeah, we might have some photos in there if you want to refer to them. But that's above the parking, so that whole footprint would be covered parking, which would be about 150 spaces, depending on how the design shakes out as we progress it. And then an additional 100 spaces of surface parking for the entire development. Above that then is 4 levels of multifamily residential units and common amenity space. What's really nice about Mike and his team is he values that high quality common amenity space, not only outside but inside the building. And in this one, I think we're taking a step up even from Garver, I think, in the amenity spaces. See what works and improve it. So kudos to him for and his team for letting us do that. So the units will be a mix of unit types to appeal to a variety of renters, from studios all the way up to 3-bedroom units. So really, in a nutshell, Mike, unless there's something I missed, that's our concept and our proposal. We do have a neighborhood meeting tomorrow, which we're going to present the concept to and get some feedback from the neighborhood as a whole, and be able to present at our next meeting for the GIP some of the feedback we got, and then some of the design progression that we have, both in plan and in imagery. So.
Anything else you want to add at this point? If not.
Questions, any?
Yeah.
Happy to answer.
All right, so you want to give a staff report?
Sure. So this is a pre-application request for Planned Development District, or PDD zoning. So no formal action would be taken tonight, but we would request feedback from the Plan Commission on whether they feel this is an appropriate use of PDD zoning. So PDD is a negotiated sort of create your own zoning district where your standards are created for this project specifically. And we're allowed to use PDD zoning when none of the other existing standard zoning districts would allow for the same level of development or quality of design. So this is very consistent with every other type of PDD that we've allowed to move forward under that process in the past. It does require that formal 2-step rezoning process. So tonight is just the precursor, the pre-application review, but it would be followed by the formal request for rezoning to PDD general implementation plan, and then if successful there, they would proceed with rezoning from GIP to SIP, which is the specific implementation plan, along with all of their other required approvals like architectural design review. This project is supported by many goals in the comprehensive plan. I just wanted to point out, as well as the corridor visioning that was recently presented to us by Vanderwell and Associates for redevelopment along Fish Hatchery Road. This is a blighted, contaminated, vacant site with a value of $2 million that they're proposing would increase the value to $30 million, providing increment to the TIF district, which would help add to the project cost for the Fish Hatchery Road reconstruction. And then in terms of the comprehensive plan, again, the focus has been a lot recently on redevelopment and improving older areas in the city while avoiding pressure on the urban edge. So in terms of the comprehensive plan, this would be consistent. And then I just also wanted to point out a couple of other things. Parking, typically our standards are two parking stalls per unit. The applicants are proposing a ratio of 1.2 parking stalls per unit, so less than that. Again, that's consistent with all of the PDDs that we've approved recently. It is a little bit on the lower end, I believe. This is more comparable to some of the senior projects that we've approved recently, which have had that 1.2 parking stalls per unit. The applicants, I think, should be comfortable with it, and they're proposing the 1.2. Their application materials state that they feel that's a level that they support, and as you can tell by the site, it's really maximized in terms of surface parking as well as underground parking. And then that brings me to the last point. There is some impervious surface and parking proposed on the southern edge of the site, which is within the boundary of our required environmental corridor buffer. So there's Nine Springs Creek that runs through this area in wetlands. And our comprehensive plan requires a 75-foot buffer, vegetated buffer from those corridors. Those may be amended, but our comp plan states that they would be amended in accordance with CARPC guidelines, so the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission. So therefore, CARPC is the appropriate venue for that variance, and we have begun that process. The Common Council approved a direct referral of a resolution last week to apply to CARPC for that corridor amendment, and the application's already been submitted. There will be a public hearing on that corridor amendment on December 12th, and it's anticipated that CARPC could take action on that same night, and that would allow this project to move forward. The amendment overall would reduce the amount of impervious surface within the existing environmental corridor compared to existing conditions, but because it still is impervious surface at a buffer of less than 75 feet, it requires the amendment nonetheless. And then it would also actually increase the total amount of area within the environmental corridor. So this area to the east or the back end of their project site would be added to the environmental corridor. So 2 improvements overall, leading staff to support that amendment.
All right, and I was able to go and tour the Garver Point project that they did, which is very similar to this, and it was a very nice facility. Going through there was impressive, the quality in there. The kind of green space on top of the parking was a really neat addition and something that's available for the people in this area. I know that there's some environmental and just kind of elevation challenges with this site, but I think it's a really great project to rejuvenate this, not only this site, but this corridor. I think will really probably match well with the senior housing project going in right across the street, actually. So, other comments, questions?
Yeah, I agree with you, Aaron. My one question is why there are no preliminary elevation views? I'm struggling trying to figure out what the retail on Fish Hatchery look like with a 13-foot drop from Traceway to the end of the property. Could you explain a little bit more to me?
Sure. So the retail, both on the north and the south, the lighter yellow there, I don't know if you guys can discern that.
Yeah.
There's a lighter and darker there. Those are the retail areas. Those will be single story. The one on the north will be more of a higher bay. So when I say single, I shouldn't say single story, I should say single level. The height of those is 2-story. So that would go up to the floor of the 3rd floor. So it would have a presence on the corner there. And then the multifamily portion of the building would rise above that.
Got it.
And then that's the same on the southern end, although that's only a single height. That's conceived as a smaller footprint.
Fair. I was envisioning retail going all the way across Fish Hatchery, like bottom floor retail, living above 2nd, 3rd, and above. So I get it. I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Yep.
Tom?
So if I just understood you right, your retail and housing are 2 separate to a degree. I mean, you have the housing and then the retail next to it.
Correct. It's a single building, but they're separated uses.
That's what I'm referring to, like not like East Washington Avenue where you have retail below and apartments above. That's not
correct.
That's not what I'm envisioning. Is that correct?
On the southern.
On the
portion.
southern end, that happens. So the retail tucks under the residential on the southern end. On the northern end, it's more separate because we wanted that double height, more grand space at the corner than continuing the second floor of the residential. So if you go to there's a good conceptual section there of that. So the parking, the covered parking is under the residential areas only, if that answers your question.
Okay, I see what you're saying. And you said this goes to the neighborhood. You haven't brought it to the neighborhood yet, right?
Tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night? Did you talk to the two alders about this? Have you already talked to them?
We talked with one and we're unable to kind of coordinate with the second, but we've been in contact with them through email. Yeah.
That's fine, that's fine. Man, I know how Dane County works. When you go to CARPS, you bring all the troops. Okay, bring the troops.
Yes, sir. I'll wait until it comes back.
All right, Ed?
Is this a market rate project?
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay. Any demand out there for 3 bedrooms? I see that's not in the plan.
I'm sorry.
3-bedroom units?
Any,
Demand for 3-bedroom units?
is there any demand for it, or do
Yeah,
we have
I
some?
don't see it incorporated here, and I'm just wondering whether you're seeing demand in the marketplace.
So there are in fact some 3-bedroom units in the project. With our latest, I'm not sure how current what was in the submittal is, but we do have some in this. We have had a limited amount of 3-bedroom units in our last project, Garver, for example, and they were some of the very first units that went. I think there's a latent demand for 3 bedrooms that has been held back by there not being a lot of 3-bedroom supply existing. So typically a 2-bedroom plus 3-bedroom, I don't want to split hairs, they're kind of the same type of unit size. We would like to see somewhere between 5 and 7% of the units be around that. I don't know if we're quite that. Maybe we're about 3 or 4% right now in our current plans, but we haven't had trouble renting them up at other projects.
Okay, thanks. And then final question, long-term, who is the ownership and who's the management?
So the ownership will be it will start with the development company, and we will have a series of individual investors also join the equity stack for ownership. The asset manager for the building will be a subsidiary of Venture Capital Real Estate Asset Management. And the property management, not only is McGrath Property Group a development partner of ours, but they do all of our long-term property management.
Okay, but I assumed you were going to say, so do you view this as a long-term hold or something that you really just kind of build out, fill in?
No, in fact, our approach to this, I think, is different than a lot of other developers in the area, and we don't ever plan to sell these. We take a stake in them and we hold them forever. That's what we've done with all of the other buildings in our project. For us, it's kind of an ongoing distribution stream that then helps us continue to do more projects.
We're also hoping to put our offices in here. It's a 5-minute commute to us from our homes, so.
Fabulous.
Perfect location.
Great, thanks.
Stephen, did you have a comment?
Yeah, so the presentation that we had a few months ago where we kind of talked about this whole area and what the redevelopment of South Fish Hatch might look like, I think this was a site where the idea, and we all kind of guessed whether or not that would actually be practical or feasible, but was the idea of a high-rise, is that this site?
It was behind it, wasn't it?
Well,
Dirt
no,
behind it.
What I'm getting at is this is kind of going to, if what we saw a couple months ago in that presentation, this will be the intersection of Main Street and Main Street in Fitchburg, right? That's what that whole presentation was, that this is going to be the hub of Fitchburg.
I wouldn't say it's the hub, but this is going to be certainly a very prominent intersection in the city when you drive down Fishhatcher Road. This matches with what they had presented actually in those plans. This site and this project actually matches with what was presented.
Okay, I guess I remember it being a bit of a grandeur idea to have that corner really anchor that space, given what's going to be going to the east of there. And while this seems like a perfectly good option, I just wonder, because of what's there now, it's a great idea and it's exactly what we could use. I'm just thinking down the road when that all gets developed, is this going to feel kind of a small picture idea for that space, given what that rest of that space should become in the next 5-10 years?
Personal opinion is I don't think so. I think that just with the cost of construction, this being 4, kind of 5 stories is really a pretty common in terms of a max, because once you get over that, then you have to use steel, something more expensive, you go a lot higher. So to me, I think this is a great project for the site, a great thing that's gonna really complement not only what's across the street getting built already, but the other uses that are gonna be coming behind that as well. I think it's gonna be very prominent as you drive down there, that retail piece that is, I guess, on the north side of the building. I think as you drive south down Fishhatcher Road, that's gonna be a very prominent piece to that. There is a piece further north of this that they did talk about as well, which would be on the, I believe it's Post Road intersection, which might be the project.
That's where that was.
Yeah, that is.
That's what I was
It's
thinking of,
the one
more
up.
the hub. That was up
It's
at,
the next one.
Okay.
Post, not Traceway. Okay, that's where I'm getting confused. I guess though, to your point, I can picture what you're saying, driving down going southbound, having retail in the corner, looks great. Just given where this is, shouldn't that whole side be retail? I mean, shouldn't we be, wouldn't that make sense, given you're on a main corridor? Why put residential on a first floor that has?
It has to do with those grading issues we talked about. So if you can envision going from, 14 feet up to level, and now if you want, okay, so you want your commercial to kind of have an even ceiling. So if we start with 10 feet here, so we're up now, we've got a 24-foot ceiling on this end, so that the commercial level, and then you've got a step going across. It was an odd topography to kind of deal with, so our solution to that was create the bookends and leave it just as regular building sloping down in between the bookends. I think you'll find it's actually a much more efficient way to design it than trying to jam a 24-foot ceiling commercial retail space on one end with a 10-foot one on the other end.
I guess I'm still not following, because it's not like you're building apartments like this.
No, you're gonna build your retail going across, or the commercial, the roof of it's gonna go across flat, units above, okay? So as you go across flat, if you envision the ground here, so this is 10 foot high, but then the ground drops 14 feet. If you got the top of your retail flat, then you suddenly got a 24-foot floor to ceiling retail space on the other end, and it looks wonky.
Could you speak to why you don't want to move much dirt either? Because I think that's another piece to it, is that
Why we don't want to.
why you're not moving much dirt on that site.
Yeah, so there is a deed restriction from the DNR. There were 2 leaking underground storage tanks on site that were remediated by PECFA funds back in the mid-90s. However, they burned through all the PECFA funds before they were able to actually completely remediate. The DNR allowed them to cap it, which is, again, to Sonia's point before, part of the reason there is so much impervious cap on that site right now is because the DNR required it. The DNR, we need to negotiate with them to actually temporarily remove that, but then we must replace it over the portion that is still petroleum contaminated. So there are some issues. You don't want to move soil around, so we couldn't kind of just raise the whole site or lower the whole site to make it more level. The soil that's on the site can be moved around the site or left in place, but not trucked away unless, every bit of soil in that area that gets trucked away has to go to a hazardous site, which is extremely expensive.
Stephen, just one other comment to your question about the commercial.
Like, if you could go to a mic for us, or grab a mic, then people are watching online, and there actually are people that do watch online, they can hear you.
Because it's riveting.
Sorry about that. Stephen, I just want to give one other answer to your commercial sort of question. As Sonia indicated, we're slightly below your kind of normal desired sort of parking ratios. We believe it works, but we basically used every available foot for parking where we could, including one level of full underground parking under the residential. So if we were going to have more commercial in that middle space, which would be the logical space for it along Fish Hatchery, we'd need significant additional parking, and there just isn't space for it without the excavation, and that's why it ties into the environmental contamination, because we can't really go lower or move the fill around to sort of add an extra layer of parking. Therefore, that places some limits, and we've had to balance the commercial with the residential and the parking limits that we have.
That also then kind of ties back to your question, why isn't this the big
Well, and
20-story
that, I
tower?
completely take that back, because I was mistaking this for a property north of here. So
You wouldn't be able to park it here.
Yeah, no, and now this makes absolute sense for this intersection. I was picturing up further north.
Elaine?
How about parking? Since this is Fish Hatchery, is the Traceway extension come with a light?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know with one of the projects to the south, there was concern about turning in there, exiting out there, especially with retail. And I'm assuming, from about an 18, 24-month span, we're going to go from the traffic that's normally there to a bunch of seniors, younger seniors pulling it out of there, and then whatever you put in there. Has there been traffic studies done yet, or is that too early in the process? I don't know which question I go to either one of you.
There haven't been, there have been voluminous amounts of traffic studies done on Fish Hatchery Road.
Right.
So, but for this particular, everything that's going to happen at that intersection with the Fish Hatchery Road redevelopment and with the Traceway extension is going to make it safer. It's going to become a proper lighted intersection with dedicated turn lanes and walkways and bike crossings and carve-outs for the medians and, So everything that is going to be there eventually is going to be safer than it is right now.
The applicants have been working closely with Public Works staff as well on this proposed access down on the southern end of the site, as well as the dedication for the Traceway extension and the turn lanes and the access point here into their site.
So we're just not privy to that yet.
Anything else?
Yeah, so there's parking under all of the residential portion of the building?
Correct.
Okay, and the courtyard as well?
Correct.
All right, so
I mean, we're using from edge to edge of that
yeah.
footprint for underground parking.
So are you using that then also as far as ventilation goes for any remaining petroleum vapors?
Well, we will have infrastructure installed for vapor management underneath the slab.
Okay.
And, it will, again, we had this very, very similar issue at Garver that we just completed where we went through a brownfield grant from WEDC and remediated a lot of contaminated soils on that site, put in all the infrastructure for the vapor barriers. Then after this site is complete, they will come in and then do testing to actually see, well, do we need to put the vapor management in, or is it the slab itself kind of containing it? So you plan for it. If you need it, you can put it in. If you don't, you don't have to.
Okay, but you've also got the parking between that and
Yeah, and you also
the
have that extra
residential,
layer. Correct.
Okay.
Zach?
I was just curious, when is the meeting and where tomorrow?
It is 6 p.m. tomorrow night, right over at the library.
Community Center.
Oh, community center, sorry, misspoke.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else at all? Otherwise, if someone wants to make a motion, we can do that too.
It's just
I'm sorry, we don't need a motion, sorry. All right. Anything else?
Thanks, guys. I like it.
All right,
I
thank
think it's
you.
good. It's win-win all around.
Yeah. I expect we'll see you lots more times.
All right.
Looking forward to it.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. All right, moving on to J, Resolution R18919. Sonia, do you want to speak to this?
Sure. This is a deed restriction on the golf course on Fish Hatch and Traceway. And this resolution would amend that deed restriction. So currently, the deed has some limitations, and those are described in the staff report. Things along the lines of no outdoor lighting, except for lighting located adjacent to the pond, as well as no sports or other activities permitted within the park after dusk. So this was brought to our attention when reviewing the Fish Hatchery Road reconstruction plans, including the associated multi-use path that will be along that side of the property. So this deed restriction would limit that type of construction for the multi-use path. So we're utilizing an allowance under state statutes to relieve that deed restriction. And then the revised language would be that uses are permitted that do not interfere with the primary operation of the land as a golf course or a park.
Anything else? All right. I think that's probably the big key for me is that there's no plans to not make this a golf course anymore and have the frisbee golf and the golf and all those things. It's really just trying to enable to do some things that make that area safer that we're restricted to right now. Other questions, comments at all?
I move to approve R189-19.
Second.
Seconded by Tom. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, thank you. And then Kay, you want to speak to that, Sonia?
This is an easement that's required in order to extend utilities to the next phase of the Fahey Fields plat. And the area of the easement would be where future right-of-way is noted for Notre Dame Drive. And the Public Works comments note that once that drive is dedicated, the easement would be released.
All right, questions at all?
Move approval.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, so that passes as well. And then comp plans, is there something that you want to present? I have some people want to speak on various things, but
Sure, I'll just give you an overview of what we wanted to touch on tonight. Really the focus of the conversation tonight is that draft land use chapter, and that was included in your packets. But before we get into that, just wanted to review upcoming meetings for the record and give you a preview of tomorrow's open house. So do you want me to jump into that now? It should be brief.
yeah, why don't you do that?
So upcoming dates as we near the end of this planning process. Tomorrow night is the citywide open house.
Up there.
Oops, sorry.
That's weird. Technical difficulties.
Let me try. We'll just go like this. So tomorrow night, November 20th, is the open house here, 6:30 in this room. And then upcoming council meetings, content, right now, we are not committed to any specific content at those upcoming meetings, but the dates are available for additional updates and discussion by the council, November 26th and December 10th. We do have a special plan commission meeting scheduled and held on your calendars for Thursday, December 12th. I believe that's also at 6:30. We intend the focus of that meeting to be on the specific goals, objectives, and policies that are going to be listed at the end of each plan chapter. So we just want to make sure that you have an opportunity to look at those specifically and tweak language as needed. We'll have some staff analysis to go along with that. And then we do have our regular December 17th Plan Commission meeting to tie up loose ends, as well as January 4th Council, before we get to January 21st, which is the anticipated date of the public hearing before the Plan Commission. And at that meeting, we would ask for a recommendation to the council on adoption of the plan. So everything that precedes January 21st are your remaining public meeting opportunities to provide direction to staff and try to get to consensus on all of the details. I also wanted to give you a preview of tomorrow's open house agenda. The start time is 6:30. We anticipate a few minutes of public arrival and sort of mingling. And then at 6:45, we'll start with an introduction from the mayor and staff comments. So we'll have a presentation just providing an overview of those things listed on the screen of where we've come and what sort of the major plan revisions are for about 15 minutes. Following that, it will be an informal sort of drop-in style open house. So we will have 7 to 8 boards set up in the room on easels that will summarize various content in the plan. There will be no sort of formal guidance or activity associated with that. Instead, staff will be stationed at the boards and will help facilitate conversation and point out information to interested members of the public. Not something that is required of Plan Commission members for a quorum or anything along those lines in terms of attendance, but I would note that this is a plan that, of course, the Plan Commission takes regulatory action on every month, and if you would like to come and sort of be invested and start to discuss the plan with the public from that side of things, that's always encouraged. From there, maybe turning it over to public comments, and then Wade's gonna just walk us through the draft land use chapter that's included in the packet.
All right, first up, I have Craig Wright, and after that will be Jay Hockneys. Yeah, come on up to the microphone so people can hear you at home.
I just have a couple of questions, maybe, and comments. It's about the proposed Edgewood development for the athletic fields. The first question is really more of a transportation-related issue. And because that's out of the urban service area, or it has been, there's probably been no plan for any kind of transportation impact on that. That's my assumption.
So you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any sort of long-range plans for the southern section of Seminole Highway. And because it's at the conceptual level of sort of future land use, we haven't reviewed in detail any of the site plans or development impacts proposed by Edgewood.
Sure. Probably the same thing with utilities, stormwater, water. Okay. So because that hasn't really been undertaken, there's no really financial impact to the city yet that can be determined?
Not at this point, no.
But it's assumed that it will impact the city?
We don't know that.
With some kind of improvements? So
Possibly, I think it's hard to say. Those things might be dependent on their approval and might be something that we ask the landlord to do.
So the plan itself that you've been using over the last 5 to 10 years, significant development efforts towards the Highway 14 corridor in terms of transportation, both private and public. So you know, busing, rail, it's all mentioned in the plan. So that's the first concern. The city has spent significant funds to develop a corridor for public events and public transportation. And it should kind of fit, this kind of development effort should fit in that kind of, that bigger strategy, for lack of better. So because we haven't really accounted for transportation or any of the utilities in what's being proposed, where we have an existing area that has been taken into account. Has there been any thought to that kind of area for these kinds of public event facilities?
I don't know if you want to speak to that or you want me to speak to that.
I think in general, staff comments at the last few months of meetings have indicated that we've had available land within planned existing growth areas where we do have transportation infrastructure in place and where our land use decisions have guided or provided input on our capital improvement plans and things like that. So that's correct. It was the sort of direction of the Plan Commission and the council to pursue this use on this property.
Sure. No, I'm not against that kind of facility per se, but I don't think that's the location it should be in. That just the traffic patterns in that area have increased greatly. And I was talking to someone, and they said there's going to be about 85 to 90 events on a nightly basis over the course of a year. And if those are night events, that's typically at the time of high traffic use in that quarter to begin with. People are commuting home from work and so forth. I mean, there's a host of issues, and I assume that that'll mean that the infrastructure of the city is going to be put under stress. And the city is eventually going to have to do something about it, both from transportation and public utilities. So I guess it's just kind of like we've spent a large amount of a lot of city funds for that Highway 14 corridor with the vision of making that corridor for, there's just better egress for that. The other issue, and I don't know if you have an answer on this either, if this goes through, is this land come off the city tax base?
I guess right now there's not much tax base to it because it's farmland, but it would, I imagine, be that nothing's been approved yet for it. I know there's an idea, but I would say it's likely.
So we're probably going to, and then we're trying to, okay, so we'll probably incur some additional cost. We're actually going to reduce revenue. And I'm not sure why there's probably better sites in the city of Fitchburg, let's put it that way. So I think that's, so I guess I'm just registering my opposition to this, given what I've just stated. I hope you'll consider it. I'm not sure if, I found out about it through the Fitchburg Star, and I hope there's more kind of discussion about this moving forward. I told somebody if the city's going to do it big. I mean, the Madison folks from the school are here talking about school pressure and all that, right? Couldn't you build some kind of facility where there's multi-use access for more venues like that and make it kind of a place to go in the city of Fitchburg? And again, where you're proposing to put it is not a good location to do that. Just the Highway 14 corridor would probably serve that much better. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, I have Jay, and then after that is Cheryl.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to appear here tonight on this matter. I'd like to share a few insights tonight and encourage this body to recommend or adopt a resolution or a motion tonight that the review of the draft dated 11/19/19 be formally agended for the council meeting on the 26th of November, so that the council can also provide feedback on this draft beyond what the Plan Commission provides. And the purpose of that feedback is to be sure that the council is comfortable with whatever version of the draft is published and for which a public hearing will occur right now, scheduled for the January 21st Plan Commission meeting. I think it's extremely important that the draft that is taken to the citizens of Fitchburg be reviewed by this body and by the council. And the contents of that draft are, what would you say, reviewed and endorsed by the bodies. And to the extent that there is not agreement on a particular provision, then alternative language that represents the various views on this should be included, because otherwise, we're going to wind up with the same ping pong match we've had on comp plan amendments that have come forward on a minor basis year after year. And what happens, as we all know, is that the Plan Commission makes a recommendation that the council isn't comfortable with. It comes back, and the very same thing is going to happen today, not today, is going to happen over the course of the next 4 months with regard to this draft comp plan. So I really, really hope that this body would make a gesture of goodwill to the council and recommend that the council review the draft that's the subject of the open house tomorrow. I also want to commend the staff for getting these documents ready into the quality format that they're in. They've done an excellent job. This document is ready for prime time. It's ready to be reviewed. There are a number of issues that need to be dealt with in it, but that's fine. That's what this process is all about. This process is to get public input to determine what the final plan should look like next year. And so I would again emphasize that I really hope that this is scheduled for review at the council on the 26th of November. And that the wording in the draft that is taken to public hearing on the 21st of January reflects feedback from both bodies. I'd also appreciate the forbearance here. I might have gone over 3 minutes. The other thing I do want to mention is I just discovered this evening that there is a list of, for lack of a better term, variances from the current land use map. I don't remember all the numbers. I could give those to you, but I know Sonia knows what they are. And there are some changes that are being proposed that almost look like minor amendments to the comp plan that ought to be handled as minor amendments. And one in particular is proposing changes to a comp plan amendment that is still pending. And I don't understand why that would be included in the comp plan update, since there's already a transaction pending on that. So thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thanks, Jay. Cheryl.
Hi, Cheryl Strassman. I just had a question on number 5 on the comp plan is at 25, I thought I could read that, but 2546 and 2556 South Fish Hatchery Road. That's the properties that are right next to mine that we've had a lot of contention with. We've been before Plan Commission. It was 3 of the alders, when Dan Carpenter had to resign, sponsored an amendment to the comp plan. And it went back and forth it was passed at the council, the Plan Commission added to the low-density industrial commercial. And then I see in here, and I don't know who came up with it, now it's changed to mixed use. The other things have been going back and forth, and they haven't been resolved. And now I'm concerned, I want to know who changed that to mixed use, is my question. And every time this has been discussed, it's talked about industrial, commercial, low density, high density. We do have commercial behind our house, but that is our residence. We live there, and we've lived there since 1978. And 4 years ago, we tore down our old house and built a new house there. So we plan on staying there. So I've searched through all the things that could be put there under industrial, commercial, high density, low density, and mixed use. And there's a lot of them that I would never pick a property and put a house there. We have commercial behind our house. Nobody even knows it's there, really. I mean, people have come in and passed that for a long time and don't even know we're behind there. So I want to know who is this a resolution now that you're going to change? Who put that in there? Whose idea was that? That's what I want to know. How did it get there?
I believe I have the correct language here that you're referring to on the plan, and I believe this is an older version of the language that was maybe a prior designation for those properties, but regardless, whatever it says in here, we'll make sure that that's clarified. It should state the existing future land use on those properties as currently adopted in the comp plan. So that's what this language should reflect, and then it would only be changed to something different through the minor amendment process, which is currently pending through Plan Commission and Council. So we'll make sure that that's clarified right away tomorrow.
But on your maps, it shows mixed use now. And
We'll make sure it's cleaned up.
Pardon?
We'll make sure it's cleaned up to reflect the currently adopted comprehensive plan.
Okay.
Yep.
And whatever comes through in the amendment, whatever council and this body passes, that will be what it is, regardless of if it says mixed use or anything like that.
Okay.
Whatever we pass will be what it is, and hopefully we can get that settled in the next month or two here, so that in January, it is the right thing that we passed, and it's not mixed use or anything else like that. We
Okay.
do want to make sure that that's.
Well, I just didn't
I
want to have
understand
to
your
start
concern.
all over
Yeah.
with another amendment.
Yeah.
Or, and trying to convince people, because we've invested a lot of time, and a lot of people have invested a lot of time with this project. The current homeowner in both of those properties, he isn't going to live with what's ever there, because he's going to be gone up north, and he's never going to see Fitchburg again, probably. So it's the people that live there, really, and live around there in Burnwood. We've been up to many, many meetings. So I just wanted to make sure that that wasn't just changed, and that's the way it's going to be.
No. Well,
Okay.
I will make sure that whatever we pass, that's what it'll be.
Okay.
The final thing.
All right.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you.
I understand your
appreciate
concern.
it.
I understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. I also have Mike Croft from Fitchburg registering in support of the above matter. Just a friendly reminder that our property in the previously approved Northeast Neighborhood Plan and the approved Comprehensive Development Plan were approved to be in the urban service area. We have a church that may be interested in building a church at 2733 County Highway MM with private sewer and water, not city services. So, one last comment there. I don't have any other public comments at this point. Do you want to, Wade or?
Yeah, and as Wade's coming over here, I'll just point out for the comprehensive plan open house tomorrow night, we did, as the residents just mentioned, put together a complete draft of the plan, and that was posted online today. So you can see that here. It's a total of 154 pages, and we have this table of contents. It's all compiled together as one PDF document. So these are a lot of documents that you have already seen here at Plan Commission and at Council as well. And we'll continue to get this information in front of the two bodies, but it includes the plan primer, and the introduction. You've seen both of those chapters. And then the meat of the plan, those middle sections on Fitchburg's growth pillars and growth tools. You've seen one of those chapters, that's housing. The other chapters, as we've mentioned, follow a very similar format. You haven't seen the drafts of those yet here in front of you at Plan Commission specifically, but those are now compiled and included in this PDF document. And then the last sections of this document you've also seen. So land use chapter, which is the focus of tonight's discussion, and then finally chapter 5, which is implementation. So that information for the record is all posted online, and it's on the comp plan website, fitchburgwi.gov/comp plan update, right here, the first link at the top of the page. And I will turn it over to Wade to walk us through that specific chapter.
Thanks, Sonia. Yeah, so tonight we'll talk land use. This is in your packet. I'll probably kind of refer to the packet and the screen as well. As Sonia mentioned, this chapter is kind of set up like our other chapters, our housing chapter, with a little bit of nuance to it, so we'll talk about that. But again, just kind of starting out, really we present data, we analyze the data, then we come up with a policy framework that addresses the data analysis. So the first data we present is our existing land use, nothing too controversial here. Then we get into kind of our trends. So looking at historically, what have we done the past 10 years in terms of development in the city as it relates to specific land uses. And then we kind of use that trend to make projections. So this figure down here, and I'm on page 417, really projects out for 20 years what our land use consumption patterns could look like, again, as it relates to various specific land uses. And we have broken that out into 5-year periods based on, again, some data analysis. Then we get into really what we spent the last month and a half doing with our residents is engaging them in this planning process. So figuring out what do our residents want as it relates to land use. So we really just, again, 5 neighborhood meetings, a public survey, And we really tried to synthesize that information into bullet points that people could really dig into. So I'll just quickly kind of touch on some of these in terms of what the city's doing well. People like the rural-urban balance. They like proactively identifying growth areas for development. They like our parks and open space. They like our trails. They like our geography, our proximity to Madison. In terms of things we could do better, and this is stuff we've heard before, things you guys have probably heard before, but the idea of developing a city center, enhancing our identity, reinvesting in our northern neighborhoods, creating kind of the mixed-use neighborhoods that we've all talked about, kind of enhancing our third spaces, our entertainment areas, our social gathering spaces, identifying additional lands for industrial development, reducing pace of multifamily residential development, creating more stringent development review standards, and then finally allowing more flexibility to alter our land use plans. So again, kind of a summary of some themes that we've heard from our residents and city committees. Then we look at all our existing plans and policies that kind of inform our land use chapter, our neighborhood plans, our housing plan, our economic development strategies, our Healthy Neighborhoods Initiative, our ag plan, our parks plan, and so on. We also look at the various ordinances that inform land use in the city, and then obviously the committees that inform land use as well. So we take all those pieces and then we analyze them and then we come up with themes. And again, these are kind of big picture, 30,000-foot concepts that we think summarize all those data pieces that we just talked about. And I just want to quickly run through these because I think they're very important and they help inform our goals, objectives, and policies which come after these. So the first theme is this idea of healthy neighborhoods. Again, really focusing on reinvesting in our northern neighborhoods, kind of reinvigorating those areas, but also as we develop new neighborhoods, really paying attention to what makes for those good, healthy neighborhoods. As we discussed tonight, really looking at our major corridors and gateways as kind of these places of focus for growth over the next 10 years. North Fishhatch Road is one example. Districts and nodes, again, trying to create identity in various parts of our city, and we can talk more about that. Land acquisition and site assembly, again, the idea of the city potentially being proactive with acquiring land to spur development in specific areas. Agriculture, we saw a really good example tonight of the potential future of agriculture in our city. So again, really making sure that stays front and center as we grow and develop. Water, we've heard about that quite a bit as well over the past months, past years, making sure we manage stormwater in a way that mitigates impacts both within our city and regionally. Moving on to the second page of themes, communication. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. I think, obviously when we talk about good land use, good city government, communication is key. Similarly, partnerships, working with our residents, working with development interests, working with other government units to really find those common goals to create good land use and planning in our city. And then finally, incentives, just this idea of, TIF, we use that quite a bit. We will likely continue to use that and just exploring other mechanisms that we can incentivize good development and land use in our city. So we wrap all that up and then we kind of create our policy framework. And we get a little bit, this looks a little bit different than some of the other chapters. So what we really tried to do here is bring in everything that's in our existing plan and kind of break it out into two different segments. The first is kind of this idea of general land use policy, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So kind of the first thing in that regard is this idea of growth zones. If you remember, we've talked about this fields concept of greenfield, gray field, and farm field, really looking at kind of segregating our city into those three field concepts and then really doing good planning and development in all three of those field areas. So we are working on a map that will really identify those three field areas. That's actually in the draft that Sonia mentioned. If people want to see that map, it didn't make it into this version. And then we just kind of identify what each of those field concepts is about. Again, greenfield is really about our future urban development areas outside of our urban service area. This stuff is basically coming verbatim from our existing plan, so no surprises here. And I'm moving on to page 426 of the packet. Then we start talking about gray field. This is a little bit of a newer concept in terms of really identifying areas in our city that we want to call gray fields and focus redevelopment on. One of those areas, as we heard tonight, North Fish Hatchery Road. Second area is Verona Road, kind of on both sides of the Verona Road corridor. And then, of course, the Southdale area in the town of Madison lands that we'll soon be getting. And then the third field, again, is kind of our farm field. Again, really, how do we kind of accentuate what I'll call new agricultural land uses in our city outside of our urban service area. So then we kind of move into the future land use map. I'm on page 428. Again, a little bit of a work in progress, but essentially we pulled this from our existing plan. So again, no real surprises there. We have noted the Edgewood property and the Oregon property on this draft map based on recent discussions with this body. And then, as we just mentioned, there are a few nuances to that map. So we have notes that really describe those specific nuances. And again, this stuff came right from the existing plan. And then we really talk about that map in more detail. We identify all the different categories of land uses on that map. I'm moving through page 432, 433. We talk about environmental corridors, the areas we want to protect. And then we get to I'm on page 435, our sector plan. And again, this is kind of our smart code zoning, offers an alternative to that traditional Euclidean zoning that we just talked about. And again, just kind of reiterates in text what the map displays visually. We talk more specifically about how we expand into our greenfield areas. So as it relates to urban service area expansion, we talk about phasing, staging. Again, these are all policies that are coming directly from our existing plan. Moving on to page 443, then we talk more about, again, kind of that farm field idea and how we can manage growth in those areas through existing ordinances and policies. Page 444, we start talking about kind of these areas where we can either are potential areas for cooperation with planning or areas that could be areas of conflict. A lot of these are right on our borders, town of Verona, town of Madison, town of Verona, city of Verona. So we just kind of at town of Dunn, town of Oregon, village of Oregon, town of Madison, and city of Madison. And then with that, we get into the kind of the real kind of text-heavy policies, goals, objectives, and policies. Again, this stuff comes straight from our existing plan, but we kind of set it up in terms of hierarchy. Goals are kind of your high-level statements. Objectives are a bit more specific, and then policies are very specific. So a lot of pages of what we call GOPs. I'm not going to go through all those with you guys, but again, just want you to understand that all of these came from our existing plan. I think the thought is in December, we'll really dig into these and make sure these are addressing all those themes that we just discussed, as well as the interests of this body. So that is quick and dirty of our 40-page land use chapter. Can certainly take any questions or comments that the commission might have.
Someone want to provide any feedback, comments at all? Ed?
A couple things. On page 420, it referenced land acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that's been kind of hashed out or discussed at council level, that would be kind of a new direction?
I'll give a little feedback and then you guys can jump in. So I just want to let you guys know where that came from. So again, the themes really came from analysis of existing plans and policies. And I believe that was mentioned in City in Motion, our economic development document. Housing. So it was mentioned in a few different places. To my knowledge, and I'll defer to the mayor here, I think that's kind of where the conversation has stopped at this point.
Yeah, obviously those things cost a lot of money and we don't have that money right now, but I think that's one of the things that we'll look at as we close TIDs, but keep them open for an extra year to use towards affordable housing types of initiatives. I think that's where once we have those dollars from keeping those TIDs open, that's something that we'll pursue at that point in time. And that's something that I'm sure this body and the housing committee and the council will all kind of be a part of and determine how that's going to work, because right now it doesn't matter. We don't have money to do that anyway, but that's something long-term that, is a strategy that we maybe don't want to pursue, but is something that we have certainly discussed as a possibility. There might be something like the juice plant, for example, tonight, where the city or the church on Fitchburg Road that eventually was sold to someone else. Those are examples of properties that if we had something in the past, we had this bank of money to use towards it, we might have a city said, let's buy that and let's go out for RFPs. This is our vision, and get developer ideas, and then sell it or do something with that kind of developer where the city can kind of help initiate some of that development.
Okay, thanks. The other question I had, we probably don't know an answer to, but looking at page 425, it referenced the southeast neighborhood, which was, the special study area near the southeast neighborhood. That, when it went in 2009, was predicated on the idea that at some point a Highway B could come through and connect to Highway 14. Do we know whether an interchange at that location or that proximity to the Highway 14 and the Highway M interchanges would even be allowed or considered by the state?
Great question. I don't know the answer, but I can do some digging and talk to Public Works on the history of that area.
Okay, because that was a big part of the thought of putting it in. We didn't know the answer to that then either, but we also didn't have the Highway 14, the new interchange at that point. So
Okay.
I don't know what.
Sure.
I'd be curious to know.
Look into that one. Mhm.
There's certainly a long drive from the interchange to Oregon at this point. You'd think at some point there might be another interchange somewhere, but
And that's the logical
who knows?
spot, which was why, even though it couldn't be gravity sewered, it went in as this kind of question mark area.
Yeah.
Okay.
No plans that we're aware of it. Any imminent plans anyway?
No, there's no plans. I just don't even know whether I don't know how far apart these interchanges need to be for state highways.
Hey, Ed, real quick, where are you talking?
It's right around where Highway B comes into MM. So there's a hashed area that's been special study area in the existing plan. It's still in there, and that's why I'm asking the question now.
Got it. I couldn't find it.
Is that it right in here, Ed, up on the screen? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Other comments at all? Questions? I mean, I'll just say that the staff continues to do a great job putting this together. I think it's real high quality, a lot of good stuff in here. So thank you for all the work you've been putting into this, everyone. Tom, you had?
Sonia, in reference to, I'm just going to talk about a major amendment now for a minute, and that was in the plan as far as, was it every 5 years, or just give me an idea? It was, we talked about minor and major amendments, and I'm just talking about the major amendment.
Mhm. The language is vague, so just a reminder that state law requires that we update it once every 10 years. We all know that. And that's at least. So the plan language does include additional language that says something along the lines of we may update it more frequently, something along the lines of every 5 years. But if you're going to do that, understand it's a major undertaking, costs a lot of money and city resources to do that. And then provide some guidelines for how you might decide whether to do an update. And then if you do decide to do one, some procedures and suggested guidelines to undertake that process. And that language is drafted in Chapter 5, the implementation chapter. We did look at that draft language at our last meeting, and we can focus on it again at future meetings.
Well, the point is I think it's real important that we don't handcuff the city. I'm still going back to let's just say, we all know it's for 10 years. Okay. The city should have the flexibility in there, though, to be able to not have the city closed for business. so that if we do have a company that comes in, say in 4 years from after this is adopted, that we could work with them. But I don't want the idea of city government saying to a potential business person, wait a minute, right here, we can't have this in the plan. Like, wait a minute, we can't have this in the plan. You have to wait until the next 10 years due to the fact that we just did our comp plan. Well, that doesn't give us the flexibility. To me, and I think my partners would agree with me, to me, that just opens the door to the Sun Prairies of the world and Middleton and other communities to get them on board. And I'm just hoping we have that flexibility within this plan, that it's not, we can't do it for 5 years. You can't do it until 6 years. I didn't read it that way, but I'm just checking, you know. I didn't really read it that way. I hope the flexibility's in there, and if it isn't, tell me.
So legally, we can't tie the hands of a future council and say you're not allowed to update your comprehensive plan. And that's always been the case, and that would be the case here with this new plan. If the council decides a major update is warranted, then they may undertake that process. But the language, again, is drafted in a way that encourages a comprehensive plan for the city based on land use planning and discourages one-off individual parcel-specific amendments unless it's something so monumentous and beneficial to the public that it's worth considering. Because we do have planned growth areas that are identified already on the map.
I'll circle back to that. Okay. The other thing is tomorrow night, is it the mayor speaks and then can the public speak too on what they'd like, or what have you, or is it just bulletin boards you're looking at and then getting feedback from the boards, or what? I missed that part.
Yep, the comments are going to be kept relatively brief, mayoral introduction followed by staff overview, and then from there, there's no further guided interaction or sort of comment period. Rather, it's this informal drop-in style viewing of the boards. We do have a plan to allow sort of sticky note comments at each of the boards where residents and the public can identify something on the board that they're interested in or would like to comment, and then stick a sticky note on that board accordingly. We would summarize that and then take it back, but no formal comment period at tomorrow night's meeting.
Absolutely want that feedback. There just won't be like a big, everyone stop and let's listen to this person speak thing. It'll be more of people just being able to go around and provide feedback. Absolutely want feedback and input, though, at that meeting.
And then, Mayor, do you, we can talk about the language another time, but how do you propose to stop this argument between the planners and the city council as far as this back and forth all the time?
Yeah, so this weekend, email Sonia a little bit. I think that it's one of those issues that as a council we need to kind of discuss, and I'm sure this body will have input as well. But much like we did with the Edgewood College property, for example, I think it's one of those issues that keeps coming up that we need to just kind of determine as a council what direction we want to provide. Is it one way or the other, provide both options to go to the community to get input on both options? How do we want to do that? Because I think there's I guess kind of three options. You could say, we're going to put in the plan, keep it as is. You could put in the plan to change it so that, it's the council has final say, or you can put in both options and get input from the community in January, and then eventually make a decision one way or the other, but essentially push that off a little bit and either way, even if you choose one way or the other in there, that's something that I think is going to get a lot of input anyway, and people can still comment on it and still could possibly be edited, but I think that that's something as a council we need to discuss and provide some direction on as well. Yeah.
So Jay raised the question, I don't know the answer to this, whether this is also being addressed at a council meeting coming up prior to the January public meeting? I don't know. Is the council looking at this also and discussing it between now and the January meeting?
when you say this, the entire plan?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we'll continue to talk about it and discuss it, and something that all of our meetings, I don't know if we're gonna talk about specific pieces or not. Encourage people to come tomorrow. Hopefully people will come tomorrow as well. We encourage people to come to our special meeting on December 12th as well, because I think that'd be really valuable. But, you know, it is something that we continue to discuss pieces of as we go further. We have to. I mean, I think it's too important to not talk about it.
And then, you know, just the issue about whether major amendments occur between now and 10 years from now. My understanding, I want to make sure I'm clear on this, is that once this plan is adopted, I believe it's the responsibility of this body and staff to follow the comprehensive plan. So if something major comes up that people want to address, that's great, but I feel like what you're suggesting, Tom, is something that opens the door wide for anybody to come in and propose anything at any time. And I don't think that, I think it's our responsibility as a plan commission to support whatever plan is adopted. And I think it's staff's responsibility too. So I don't really see how there's room for that. I think that's an issue that needs to be resolved in some manner or another before we adopt this plan.
Well, and I think it's a real important issue to this comp plan. And it doesn't open the door to every gas station or grocery store that wants to come to town. I don't mean it that way. But I think there has to be some flexibility in the plan that if a major business comes to the city would look at it and not turn it away as a city. Haven't we learned in the past? I mean, I can't say it any better. Haven't we learned from the past that this city has said no to businesses that we should have retained? This city has shoved businesses to other communities because we're too hard to work with. And I think we have to make that go away. However we do it is fine with me. But when it comes to the flexibility, I think that to say, and I'm making this up, I'm not saying it's in the plan, that the plan is good for 10 years and every 5 years we're going to look at the plan. Well, wait a minute. What if something would come up before that? What if let me use an example. What if a Costco, I don't like that.
Exact Sciences and Epic.
Yeah,
something
something bigger would come to the city. It doesn't have to be retail. I like that. We have tripped over I can't say it any better. This city has tripped over their feet more than once. And it seems to me that, and I'll say it, staff also has told people that we're not looking at this until the next comp plan. You've heard it.
But isn't that their responsibility?
It may be their responsibility,
Well,
but if it's big, it should come to the council, we should know about it, and it's a situation that the council runs the show. As far as I'm concerned in the city, unless I'm wrong.
And partly the mayor, please, right? Partly the mayor?
Mayor.
A little bit? A little bit? A little bit.
That's part of the council. That's part of the council.
Okay.
Part of the council. And it's, I think we have to just re-look at the wording on this. I don't have the exact wording tonight, don't mean it that way, but the way Ed's saying it, that it's going to open the door to any Tom, Dick, and Harry, I'm not going along with. I'm not going along with that. I look at it as a bigger problem this city has faced in the last 30 years, and we've just, haven't we learned? Haven't we, certainly, it's something we can talk about in the future. It won't be solved tonight probably, but I think it should be talked about.
you're talking about something so large that it can't be accommodated by the land available by the Highway 14 interchange.
Could be, yeah, could be,
Okay,
something like that.
It'd be pretty big, okay.
And I think that's in there, but we can look at that language to make sure it's stronger in there. But I think that's in there. It's something that really, frankly, could have happened, but I think there was some past staff that kind of turned around a lot of that and didn't consider it. But that is something that, you know, in 3 years or 7 years or 8 years, if someone does come to
Well,
us,
if
we
every,
can open that
in
up.
what
But we
you're
can look at
saying,
that
Mayor,
language.
keep
I
in
think that's
mind,
in there.
you
I-
and I and people
well,
at this table
probably won't be here.
may not be here.
Probably not.
We may not be here.
Yeah.
Speak for
And
yourself.
I'm talking for the future. We're talking about future people that are watching this tonight that are saying, you know, maybe I'll be there. That's what I'm referring to.
But by definition, it's a comprehensive plan. It goes, and I think Sonia hit it nail on the head last month. She said, this is basically how we want to do things. This is our focus, our plan. But we're not tying our hands by any means, but we're also want to make sure that we're keeping in line with what we had set up from previous years. And I know what Tom's getting at, and I can see that, but I'm thinking of the last time somebody wanted to put something adjacent to the Oregon school, and it just didn't seem like it fit, and it was out of the, it didn't fit in with the comp plan either.
Stephen?
So I agree with Tom as well. And what can we learn from our surrounding communities? How do they do it differently? Do you have any insight into that? In terms of more flexibility when those real big projects come through, but they don't fit into the comp plan? I can't imagine that some Prairie has just developed that much better of a comp plan than we have, or Verona or Middleton. So I feel like there's a disconnect. What has Fitchburg not done as well as we could have?
I think our land base is a little, I don't know the sort of cliche phrase off the top of my head, but it's sort of the thorn in our side, or a double-edged sword. We have 11,000 acres of farmland outside of planned development areas. I don't know what additional flexibility we could provide besides the fact that there's 1,200 acres of developable land within the urban service area, another 800 acres of planned growth area directly adjacent that only needs neighborhood planning and urban service area amendments to be brought in addition to all of the other FUDAs that are further south along the Highway 14 corridor. All we're talking about is not doing parcel-specific amendments anywhere, anytime, any place. We're talking about the city proactively driving those locations in places that make sense based on ability to service with sewer and water, or where we've invested millions of dollars in infrastructure, et cetera. I think the question of major amendments is really, if those areas where we've identified that we want growth to go, if those are no longer appropriate, that's fine, but let's make a new plan and stick to it, because I think this also gets to the concerns that have been raised recently about transparency and predictability. If we're changing the plan just because someone walks in and promises that it's going to be the greatest thing every other year, that's absolutely not transparent, not predictable, and it causes a lot of problems. We've had some issues in terms of trying to promote a smooth process for development review and avoid all of this conflict and ping pong matches. And I think if you allow that open door, it's just asking for more of that disorder.
I think the other thing that's different is that we don't have a town of Fitchburg. You know, somewhere like Verona, for example, the city is actually pretty small. There's not a bunch of undeveloped land in the actual city, and as they grow, then they kind of, as part of, I think, the annexation process, they figure out where to grow and what to do, versus, you know, Fitchburg, where everything is the city. So some people look at it and say, well, I want to go there or there or there, and it's not, you know, it's those cities, it's a little easier for them to kind of concentrically grow bigger and bigger.
I think that's my other disconnect, is we say we have 1,200 acres within the urban service area that's a developable land, and yet we have plenty of people saying we can't find a place to go. So that's just a disconnect. I would love to know where those 1,200 acres are and why people aren't finding those to be usable or applicable for their purpose.
Well, two of the arguments that I've heard recently is the land that was purchased outside of those developable acres is cheaper. Well, that makes sense. I mean, those were speculative purchases or donations or whatever it was, where land prices are much lower compared to developable land because they're not planned for development. They don't have any urban services. So we try to avoid those sort of speculative purchases and decisions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's cheaper. They can buy it cheaper outside the urban service area because it's not supposed to be developed, and then they come and say, oh, we bought this and we should be able to develop it. We got this great idea. Well, it was also a lot more expensive to buy the urban service area land, and so they make a lot more money by buying the cheaper land. So I think that's, and they're not gonna come in here and say that, but that's what it is.
I guess I also just, sorry, I will stop after this, but I'm not also seeing a bunch of for sale signs on open, empty property within the urban service area. So that's the other thing, that just living here, I don't know where you would, other than Highway 14 corridor, I'm actually curious, where do we have, you know, do we have a map somewhere that shows here's all the developable land within the urban service area? Anything like that?
Yep.
Okay.
That's
I
a
mean,
really good
encourage them
point.
to talk to Mike Zimmerman. He
Yeah.
knows where everything is, and there's sometimes
Because that's my
things
other
that
point.
don't
I'm like,
post.
yeah. Because I think it's easy to say if it's all the Highway 14 corridor, okay, great, but that's kind of that one spot. Where else is there in the city further west that is developable? And that's where I don't know that, but again, I'm just hearing this disconnect between the staff and people coming before us.
So we did, in July, we presented a memo that's posted on the comp plan website that details exactly what acreage is available within the urban service area. And that's also a map that's updated every single year in June by the planning department interns. So we have up-to-date data on that every year. And then I'd also remind you of our policy regarding 75 acres of growth per year. And we want to encourage no more than 75 acres of development per year, but we've also incorporated a flexibility factor to accommodate exactly what you're saying, which is a very good point. Not every property owner is willing to sell their land or ready to sell their land for development. So on a 5-year rolling average, we accommodate for what our growth policy is, as well as that, I think, 25% flexibility factor above and beyond what we would limit development to. And then we also reviewed growth trends that showed that we've never actually hit those limits. So we've set these limits, but never has it been a problem. So as planning staff, we're telling you the data doesn't show that we've run out of land or that we've exceeded demand in any 5-year period.
And I guess to that point, if we look at the trend map up on the screen, this was informed from the map that Sonia's talking about. So basically, in a 10-year period, we've developed approximately 430 acres in various land use categories. So again, that just puts kind of some of this growth discussion in some context.
But that, of course, was the recession, too.
Well, but then in the past 4 years,
cyclical.
we've gone up. So it's a boom and bust. It's a 10-year cycle, yep.
Zach, did you have a comment?
I guess my one thought was for the Highway 14 corridor, it doesn't fall under greenfield or grayfield anywhere on here. Is that something that should be called out specifically?
So when you say, let me just go back to the map. So basically our greenfield, again, are basically our FUDA areas, and that's essentially the Highway 14 corridor. So everything you see, just let me get to the map here. So all this stuff here, I believe when people are saying the Highway 14 corridor, that's what we're talking about?
Well, I'm talking more specifically like uptown.
Oh.
Where we're actually in the urban service area. It's not really called out as.
Yeah, so we're actually, that's a good point. When I talked about, we haven't quite finished our growth zone map yet, we're trying to account for that, so that'll be coming, yep.
Other comments at all? Hopefully you can make it tomorrow. See anything else staff wants to go over at this point? All right, then we can end that for now. Report from the department.
Open house tomorrow, and then next meeting, December 12th is our special meeting.
All right, seeing nothing else, if someone would like to make a motion to adjourn, we can do that.
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.